Welcome to the Rheir Kitchen. I'm Rachel Barrett, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make one of my favorite recipes, pasta bolognese from scratch. So let's very quickly go over our list of ingredients and tools that we're going to need to make this recipe. We are going to need flour. Shocker, right? We're making pasta. We're going to need flour. We're also going to need salt, olive oil, eggs that are at room temperature, extra flour to be working with, a bench scraper. Can't wait to tell you why these are my new favorite tool. You're also going to need a mini spatula. This is going to be the most important thing you're going to need. You'll soon see why, which is a fork, in case you didn't know. We're also going to need a work surface, preferably wood if you have it. And then you're going to want a damp tea towel to put underneath your wood so that it doesn't shift or slide as you start to work with the dough. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing that we want to start out by doing is removing any jewelry. This dough gets really, really sticky, and cleaning your jewelry is a pain in the butt. You're also going to want to wash your hands. Kind of goes without saying, but it's shocking how many people need to be reminded. Thirdly, you want to get jewelry that comes off a tiny bit easier. This is true love. Oh, I got it. You also want to tie your hair back. Nobody likes food with hair in it. And I would know, because for some weird reason, every time I go out to eat, I'm always the one that ends up with a hair in their dish. Make sure that all three of those things are done. Remove your jewelry, wash your hands, tie your hair back. So now it's time to get started. So we're gonna add our salt here. And you can either use this fork I told you was going to be the star of the show and blend it in to mix it, or you can use a whisk, which I'm going to use. This is dual purpose. It is evenly distributing the salt, but it's also kind of acting like a sifter to your flour, making it a little more fine. Okay, so when you're done with that, you're going to pour it straight onto your work surface. Again, we like to use a wooden work surface simply because the flour, as you're gonna see when we do the old traditional well method, doesn't shift or slide as much. So you're gonna start by taking two fingers, haha, jokes aside, and you're gonna start to make kind of what looks like a donut. You're carving out the donut hole, and you're gonna make what they call a well. Again, this is a traditional Italian method, and I actually learned how to do this from my Airbnb house when I stayed in Florence, Italy. You want to make sure that your space in the center here is pretty wide enough to hold your eggs without your walls falling or sliding. So we're just going to go around and reinforce our walls here with our hands while continuing to kind of carve out a well wide enough to hold 4 eggs. You're going to want to see the bottom of your board here in the center of your well. That's okay. So once we have it wide enough and our walls are tall enough, we are ready to begin adding the eggs. So we're gonna start with one. Pour it in the center there. I like to put my discards in the bowl, acting like a little trash can over there. Now, what we're going to do, this is why your fork is gonna be so important. This is the most important part of this process. You cannot move too slow. You're gonna use your fork as a whisk. You want to break that yolk just like you would make a scrambled egg. Quick circular motion. And when it's nice and scrambled, you're going to take your fork kind of around the center of the well just to mix in a little bit of flour here. And as it falls in, go ahead and mix it. And the reason I say to use it this way as you go around is because it really makes sure that your walls stand tall versus sloping, which will make your walls break, and then your eggs will run and it becomes a huge mess. So once we've created a good amount of space for the next egg, you can go ahead and crack it. And as I said a few times, now that I've said that, I don't want this to break. I've done this a few times, so I'm moving quicker than I would like you to move, especially if this is one of your first times. You cannot move slow enough for this part. And if you want to use your non-dominant hand to kind of go around and just make sure that the walls stand up nice and straight, you can do that. I highly encourage you to do that, in fact. And again, we're just using our fork like a whisk. You might be wondering, well, why aren't we just doing this in a non-traditional, quicker way with modern technology such as a KitchenAid mixer? The reason why is when you blend the egg with the flour immediately like that, it creates, I have found, a denser dough and produces a pasta that I just don't enjoy the taste of as much. So this is just a nicer, more time consuming but traditional cool way of making pasta that's really fresh and light. Okay, so when you add your third egg, by the time you add your third egg, you're gonna notice your quote unquote water line or your egg line gets taller. That's why I like to do this one egg at a time. You never want to add another egg until your egg line has decreased about 1/4 of an inch the way down. That just again ensures that your mound and your well are all staying intact quite nicely. So you can see how the flour here is just kind of gently falling off the top of my mound. That's great. We want to just keep incorporating that as best as we can. So now, and you'll notice if you're doing this right, your well is going to get wider and wider the more eggs that you use and the more flour that you incorporate. Okay, so I'm just gonna help it a little bit because I want a tiny bit more flour than I have right now. Okay, now we'll add the final egg. Okay. The goal is we want to keep doing this until our egg mixture in the center here has become quite stiff, almost like gelatinous-like. That's how you'll know it's good in time for you to start kneading with your hands. And that's gonna happen with the more and more flour that you have coming in. You wanna be very mindful, like this is a good area to show you, that's a little more fragile where my egg could seep through. You could see how that egg could just pool over. So I'm just gonna keep that in mind and really keep my hand here to make sure that wall stands strong. And you can even pull some flour out from around the side to kind of build that side back up. And if you're doing this and it breaks, that's totally normal. It takes a ton of practice. I certainly did not get this right my first time. You'll know you're ready when the egg mixture gets thick enough to where even if your wall did break, it's not really gonna run. It's more stiff and easy to work with. And I like to use my hand on the side here too because it kind of creates the tip of the mountain to avalanche, so to speak, and then it adds more flour into my mixture here. Okay, so now we're getting to that point where you can see it's pretty stiff. And we're very, very close now to being able to go ahead and use our hands. So now that we're at this point, you're gonna get dirty. You're gonna fold your flour in. And you're gonna start the kneading process. Now, what I say always, the goal is not to use all the flour. It's to get the right consistency of dough. Sometimes that means you'll need more flour. Sometimes it means you'll need, I just heard the pun, you'll need less. But you just want to work in kind of like a folding motion, get it all mixed in, and just start kneading. And the warmth from your hands plays a pretty big role in this as well, making the dough pretty soft and light and airy. Just fold and roll. You can see it's starting to come together very nicely here. How do you know when it feels right? Well, you want it to have a nice little bounce and elasticity to it. So right now you can kind of see through the cracking that my dough is a little dry. Totally normal because we haven't yet added our olive oil, which we're getting ready to do now. So what I like to do is when I get to this point, I like to create another well in my dough. And then I pour my olive oil straight into the well, and then I incorporate it using that folding and kneading method, adding a little bit of flour as I do so. Trying to keep it all in the center here. fold over from the sides, and then knead. Now, when I've got a good ball going, I'm gonna take my bench scraper. I'm gonna move all this out of the way, just so my dough that I have doesn't have to work hard to pick this up anymore. We can just work on getting it to that texture that we like. So if your dough's too dry at this point, you can add more olive oil. The suggested amount is about 1/4 teaspoon at a time. And if your dough's too wet, you add more flour. My dough is feeling a tiny bit dry. You can see I still have a little bit of olive oil left though. So I'm just gonna make another little hole, use my tiny spatula, pour the rest of it in there, and that should get me to where I need. So once you have your beautiful dough ball, you're going to transfer it to cellophane. We're gonna wrap it. And again, we're gonna let it rest for 30 minutes while we start our bolognese sauce.